February 23rd, 1944. 08:47 hours, 28,000 feet above Schweinfurt, Germany. Captain Robert Duke Henderson watches his wingman explode. 1 second, Lieutenant Tommy Walsh's P-51 Mustang is 200 feet off Henderson's left wing, silver skin gleaming in the morning sun. The next second, a 20mm cannon shell from a Bf-109 tears through Walsh's cockpit. The Mustang doesn't burn, it doesn't spiral, it simply disintegrates, pieces of aluminum and engine and pilot spreading across 3 miles of German sky. Henderson keys his radio. "Bandit! 9 o'clock high!" But the warning comes too late. The Luftwaffe pilots were waiting for them, positioned perfectly at altitude with the sun behind them, ready to bounce the American formation before it reached the ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt. This is the 4th time this week the Germans have intercepted Henderson's squadron with impossible precision. It's as if they know exactly when the Americans are coming, exactly what route they're taking, exactly where to position their fighters for maximum effect. Henderson counts the burning P-51s falling toward German farmland below. 7 Mustangs down in the first 3 minutes of combat. His squadron of 24 planes is already reduced to 17. The bomber formation they're supposed to be escorting is still 40 miles away, undefended, vulnerable. Henderson makes the calculation instantly. If he continues toward the bombers, the Bf-109s will pick off the rest of his squadron one by one. If he breaks off the escort mission to engage the German fighters, the bombers will be slaughtered. There are no good options. This is how the 8th Air Force is losing the air war over Germany. Not through lack of courage or skill or numbers, but through a simple fact that nobody wants to acknowledge. The Germans can see American aircraft coming from 40 miles away. Their Würzburg radar systems, deployed across occupied Europe, track every Allied formation from the moment they cross the channel. The radar gives Luftwaffe controllers time to vector their fighters into perfect ambush positions. By the time American pilots realize they're under attack, it's already too late. The statistics from February 1944 are catastrophic. In 28 days, the 8th Air Force has lost 67 P-51 Mustangs before they reached their targets. 67 of America's best long-range fighters, destroyed not in combat over the target area, but during the approach, intercepted by German fighters who were waiting in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. The pilots call it dying on the way to work. You take off from England, form up your squadron, set course for Germany, and somewhere over France or Belgium, the German fighters appear out of nowhere. Except it's not nowhere. They appear from ambush positions they reached because their radar told them you were coming 40 miles ago. Henderson's P-51 shudders as 7.92 rounds from a pursuing Bf-109 stitch a line across his left wing. He brakes hard right, pulling 6 Gs, trying to shake the German off his tail. His vision tunnels. He can feel the G-suit inflating around his legs, forcing blood back toward his brain. The Bf-109 follows him through the turn, closing the distance. Henderson is out of altitude, out of airspeed, out of ideas. Then, inexplicably, the German breaks off. Henderson watches the Bf-109 roll inverted and dive away, not damaged, not out of ammunition, just leaving. Henderson doesn't understand why until he checks his fuel gauge. He's been in combat for 9 minutes. His tanks are at 60% capacity. If he wants to make it back to England, he needs to leave now. The German pilot knew that. The Germans always know. They know when to push the attack and when to let the Americans run low on fuel and limp home. Because they've been tracking the American formations on radar since before the fighters even reached the French coast. Henderson sets course for England, alone now, his squadron scattered or destroyed. He counts the empty spaces in the formation where his friends should be. 7 pilots gone in 9 minutes. 7 families who'll get telegrams tomorrow. 7 more names added to the roster of men who died because the Germans could see them coming. What Captain Henderson doesn't know, what nobody in the 8th Air Force knows, is that 200 miles away at RAF Duxford, a 44-year-old janitor is washing a P-51 Mustang, and noticing something that will change everything. His name is Eddie Kowalski, and he's about to make American fighters invisible. RAF Duxford, England. The same day, 15:23 hours. Eddie Kowalski stands on a wooden ladder, washing the left wing of a P-51 Mustang with a bucket of soapy water and a rag. At 44 years old, Kowalski is too old for combat duty and too unskilled for technical positions. He spent 22 years as a janitor at the Packard automobile plant in Detroit before the war. When Packard converted to aircraft engine production in 1942, Kowalski stayed on, cleaning the factory floors, emptying trash bins, mopping up oil spills. In 1943, the Army Air Forces needed ground crew for the expanding P-51 squadrons in England. They recruited factory workers who understood cleanliness standards for precision equipment. Kowalski volunteered. Now he's part of the ground crew at RAF Duxford, washing fighter planes instead of factory floors. The work is essentially identical. Soap, water, rags, elbow grease. Keep the aircraft clean so mechanics can spot problems, keep the canopies clear so pilots can see, keep the engines free of debris that might get sucked into air intakes. It's not glamorous work, but it's necessary. Kowalski rinses soap off the P-51's wing and notices something odd. The aluminum skin, when covered with a thin film of dried soap, looks different. Not dramatically different, just textured. Under the afternoon sun, the soap residue creates a microscopically rough surface that scatters light slightly instead of reflecting it cleanly. Kowalski has seen this effect before, 22 years ago, at the Packard plant. New cars coming off the assembly line had mirror-smooth paint that showed every fingerprint and imperfection. After a few months of use, the paint developed a microtexture from washing, from road grit, from weathering. The textured paint didn't reflect light as sharply. It looked duller, but it also hid imperfections better. Kowalski thinks about that textured paint and looks at the soapy P-51 wing. Then he thinks about something he heard in the crew briefing this morning. The intelligence officer mentioned that German radar works by bouncing radio waves off aircraft and detecting the reflections. The bigger and smoother the aircraft surface, the stronger the radar return. That's why the P-51, with its all-metal construction and polished aluminum skin, shows up on German radar at 40 miles. It's essentially a flying mirror for radio waves. But what if the aluminum skin wasn't mirror smooth? What if it had a microtexture that scattered radio waves instead of reflecting them cleanly back to the radar receiver? Kowalski looks at the soap film on the wing. The film is maybe 0.02 inches thick, barely visible, but it's changed the surface from mirror smooth to microscopically rough. Would that affect radar reflections? Kowalski doesn't know. He's a janitor, not a physicist. But he knows about surfaces and textures and how they interact with light. And he knows that if soap film can scatter visible light, maybe it can scatter radio waves too. The problem is testing the theory. Kowalski can't just coat an aircraft in soap and send it over Germany to see if the radar picks it up. That violates probably a dozen regulations about aircraft modifications. The Army Air Forces has strict rules about what can and cannot be applied to aircraft surfaces. Approved paint, approved markings, approved maintenance procedures. Everything else is forbidden because anything that changes the aircraft's weight, aerodynamics, or structural integrity could kill the pilot. But Kowalski also knows that 67 P-51s were lost in February because German radar saw them coming 40 miles away. 67 pilots dead because the Germans had time to position their fighters for perfect intercepts. If there's even a chance that soap film could reduce radar visibility, isn't it worth testing? Kowalski makes a decision. He's going to test his theory quietly, without official authorization, and see what happens. If it doesn't work, nobody needs to know. If it does work, he'll figure out what to do next. That evening, after the regular ground crew has finished work and gone to the mess hall, Kowalski returns to the flight line with 6 bars of Ivory soap, a bucket of water, and several clean rags. He chooses a P-51 that's scheduled for a test flight tomorrow morning, a plane that needs engine testing after a carburetor replacement. The test flight will take the plane over the English Channel, but not into German airspace, so there's no combat risk. Kowalski washes the entire aircraft with soap and water, working carefully, creating an even coating. Then, instead of rinsing the soap off completely, he leaves a thin film. He uses a clean, damp rag to spread the soap evenly, creating a coating approximately 0.02 inches thick across the aluminum skin. The coating dries in about 20 minutes, leaving a barely visible residue. The aircraft looks almost normal, just slightly less shiny, as if it's a few months older than it actually is. Kowalski steps back and examines his work. From 10 feet away, you wouldn't notice anything unusual. The plane looks clean, well-maintained, ready to fly. The soap coating is invisible unless you know to look for it. Kowalski cleans up his supplies, dumps the soapy water, and goes to bed. Tomorrow morning, the test pilot will fly the plane over the channel for engine testing, and Kowalski will watch to see if the radar operators at the coastal tracking station report anything unusual. The next morning, February 24th, at 06:45 hours, Captain James Ridley climbs into the soap-coated P-51 for his engine test flight. Ridley is a maintenance test pilot, responsible for flying repaired aircraft to verify the repairs work correctly before the planes return to combat squadrons. He's flown this particular aircraft a dozen times. He knows how it handles, how the engine sounds, how the controls respond. His flight plan is simple: take off, climb to 10,000 feet, fly 40 miles out over the English Channel, run the engine through various power settings to test the new carburetor, return to base. Total flight time, 35 minutes. Ridley has no idea his aircraft is coated in soap. At 07:02 hours, Ridley takes off from RAF Duxford and sets course for the Channel. RAF Wartling, a coastal radar station 60 miles southeast, tracks his departure. The radar operators watch Ridley's plane appear on their scopes as a bright blip moving southeast at 280 miles per hour. But something is odd. The blip is fainter than usual for a P-51 at this altitude and distance. At 20 miles from the coast, where a P-51 normally shows as a strong, clear return, Ridley's plane is barely visible. At 35 miles, the radar loses him completely. The operator at RAF Wartling keys his microphone. RAF Duxford, this is Wartling radar. We've lost radar contact with your test flight. Confirming aircraft is still airborne? Duxford Tower responds. Affirmative, Wartling. Pilot reports normal. All systems green. The radar operator stares at his scope. Duxford, we should be painting that aircraft clearly at this range. He's at 10,000 feet, 38 miles southeast. We're getting nothing. Possible equipment malfunction on our end. Running diagnostics. But the radar equipment isn't malfunctioning. The equipment is working perfectly. Ridley's P-51, coated in 0.02 inches of dried soap film, is scattering radar waves instead of reflecting them cleanly. The radar return is reduced by approximately 60%. A plane that should be visible at 40 miles is now invisible beyond 15 miles. Eddie Kowalski, listening to the radio chatter in the maintenance hangar, feels his heart hammering. His theory worked. The soap coating reduced the radar signature. He's just made a P-51 Mustang partially invisible to German radar. But he's also violated multiple regulations, applied an unauthorized coating to a military aircraft, and conducted an unofficial experiment that could have compromised flight safety if the soap had affected the aircraft's aerodynamics or structural integrity. If the coating had caused problems during the test flight, Kowalski would be court-martialed. But the flight went perfectly. Ridley landed 35 minutes later, reporting normal engine performance and no handling issues. The only anomaly was the radar tracking failure, which RAF Wartling attributed to possible equipment problems. Kowalski waits until evening, after Ridley's post-flight inspection is complete and the aircraft is cleared to return to service. Then he approaches Sergeant Miller, the maintenance crew chief, and asks to speak privately. Miller, a no-nonsense aircraft mechanic from Texas with 18 years in the Army, listens to Kowalski's explanation with growing skepticism. "You coated a fighter plane in soap without authorization?" Kowalski nods. "Ivory soap. Creates a micro-textured surface that scatters radar waves. The test flight this morning shows it works. Wartling radar lost the aircraft at 15 miles instead of tracking it to 40 miles. Miller stares at him. "You're a janitor. You don't have authority to modify aircraft." "I know," Kowalski says. "But I also know that 67 P-51s were shot down last month because German radar saw them coming from 40 miles away. If soap coating can cut that to 15 miles, that's 25 miles where the Germans don't know we're coming. That's maybe 5 minutes of surprise. That might save lives." Miller thinks for a long moment. Then he says, "Show me the aircraft." Kowalski and Miller walk to the flight line and examine the soap-coated P-51 under work lights. Miller runs his hand over the wing surface, feeling the slight texture. He pulls out a magnifying glass and examines the coating close-up. Finally, he speaks. "This doesn't affect the aircraft structurally. Soap is water-soluble, so it'll wash off in rain, which means it's temporary and reversible. Weight increase is negligible, maybe 5 pounds total for the entire aircraft. And if it actually reduces radar signature by 60%, that's potentially the most significant tactical advantage we could give our pilots." Miller looks at Kowalski. "But if we report this through proper channels, it'll take months to test and approve. Months of paperwork and bureaucracy while pilots keep dying. So here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow morning, we're going to coat 3 more aircraft the same way and send them on a formation flight over the channel. We're going to coordinate with Wartling Radar to track them. If they confirm reduced radar signature on all 3 aircraft, we take this to the squadron commander immediately. Deal?" "Deal," Kowalski says. Over the next 12 hours, Kowalski and Miller quietly coat 3 P-51 Mustangs with soap film. They work after dark, using the same technique Kowalski developed. Wash with soap, leave thin residue, spread evenly, let dry. By 0600 hours on February 25th, 3 soap-coated P-51s are ready for a test flight. At 0730 hours, 3 pilots take off in formation and fly towards the channel. RAF Wartling tracks them on radar. At 20 miles, the 3 aircraft begin to fade. At 25 miles, they're barely visible. At 30 miles, the radar loses them completely. 3 P-51 Mustangs, flying in clear weather at 12,000 feet, are invisible to coastal radar at 30 miles. Normal P-51s would be tracked clearly to 40 miles. The soap coating has reduced their radar signature by 40% to 60%, depending on angle and altitude. Sergeant Miller gets the radar report and immediately requests a meeting with Lieutenant Colonel Barnes, commanding officer of the 357th Fighter Group. Barnes listens to Miller's explanation with visible disbelief. "You coated my fighters in soap?" "Ivory soap, sir. 5 cents a bar. Creates a microtexture that scatters radar waves. We've tested it on 4 aircraft. Radar signature reduced by up to 60%. Germans would see our planes at 15 miles instead of 40 miles. Barnes processes this information. He's 32 years old, a career officer who flew P-40s in North Africa before transferring to P-51s in England. He's watched too many of his pilots die in the past month, shot down by Germans who were waiting in perfect ambush positions. If there's any chance that soap coating can reduce radar visibility and give his pilots an advantage, he has to pursue it. "How many aircraft can you coat, and how fast?" Barnes asks. Miller does quick math. We have 28 operational P-51s. Coating each aircraft takes about 90 minutes. With 4 ground crew working, we could coat all 28 aircraft in approximately 10 hours. Barnes makes a decision. "Coat them, all of them, today. I want every operational P-51 in this group soap-coated by 1800 hours. Tomorrow morning we're flying a full squadron mission over France. If the soap coating works in combat conditions, we'll know by tomorrow afternoon. And if it doesn't work, The soap washes off in the next rainstorm, and nobody needs to know we tried. What Lieutenant Colonel Barnes doesn't say, but everyone understands, is that he's betting his career on a janitor's theory. If the soap coating causes accidents, if it affects aircraft performance, if pilots die because of this unauthorized modification, Barnes will be held responsible. But if it works, if American fighters can suddenly appear 25 miles closer to German airspace before radar detects them, the tactical advantage could change the air war. And that's worth the risk. By 1800 hours on February 25th, 28 P-51 Mustangs of the 357th Fighter Group are coated with thin films of ivory soap. Total cost, $140 for 28 bars of soap. Total time, 42 man-hours of ground crew labor. Total change to American air superiority over Europe. About to be revolutionary. Because tomorrow morning, those 28 fighters are going to fly over France, and the German radar operators are going to look at their screens and wonder where the hell the Americans came from. February 26th, 1944. 7:23 hours. Luftwaffe radar station, Abbeville, France. Unteroffizier Franz Weber sits in the darkened radar room, watching green phosphor traces sweep across his Würzburg radar scope. Weber has been a radar operator for 14 months, tracking Allied aircraft as they cross the channel toward German-occupied Europe. He knows the patterns. American heavy bombers appear first, large, slow-moving formations visible at 60 miles. Then the escort fighters, P-51 Mustangs and P-47 Thunderbolts, appearing at 40 miles, faster signatures, higher altitude. The radar gives Luftwaffe controllers 15 to 20 minutes of warning time to vector German fighters into intercept positions. It's a system that's been working perfectly since the Allies began their daylight bombing campaign. This morning, Weber picks up the bomber formation right on schedule. 36 B-17s, 58 miles northeast, heading toward Paris at 24,000 feet. He plots their course, reports to the Fighter Control Center at Beauvais. Then he scans for the escort fighters that should be ahead of the bomber formation. Nothing at 40 miles, nothing at 35 miles. Weber adjusts his equipment, checking for malfunction. The radar is working correctly. He can see the bombers clearly. But where are the American fighters? At 0741 hours, 18 minutes after detecting the bomber formation, Weber's radar suddenly shows 8 P-51 Mustangs at 12 miles, already deep inside French airspace, positioned perfectly to intercept any German fighters climbing to attack the bombers. Weber feels ice in his stomach. 12 miles. The Americans are at 12 miles. They should have appeared at 40 miles. He should have had 20 minutes of warning. Instead, he has 3 minutes. Maybe less. Weber keys his microphone, voice tight with urgency. Beauvais Control, this is Abbeville Station. Enemy fighters at 12 miles, bearing 045, altitude 26,000 feet. 8 aircraft. They appeared suddenly. We did not track them on approach. The voice from Beauvais sounds confused. Abbeville, confirm. You're reporting fighters at 12 miles with no prior tracking. Confirmed. Weber says, watching the 8 P-51s close on German fighter positions. They were not visible until 12 miles. Possible equipment malfunction on our end, but scope shows normal operation. The Americans? They were invisible until now. What Weber doesn't know, what nobody in the Luftwaffe knows yet, is that those 8 P-51s are coated in soap. The 357th Fighter Group, flying their first combat mission with Lieutenant Colonel Barnes's unauthorized modification, has just penetrated 28 miles deeper into French airspace than German radar normally allows. 28 miles of invisible approach. That translates to roughly 7 minutes of flight time, where the Germans don't know the Americans are coming. 7 minutes is enough to reach intercept position before German fighters can climb to altitude. 7 minutes is enough to turn a German ambush into an American ambush. At 0744 hours, the soap-coated P-51s hit 6 climbing Bf-109s from above and behind. The German pilots never saw them coming. 3 Bf-109s go down in the first 30 seconds of combat. The remaining 3 break formation and dive away, abandoning their attack on the bomber formation. The B-17s reach their target unopposed, drop their bombs, and turn for home. 0 bombers lost, 0 escort fighters lost, 3 German fighters destroyed. It's the kind of lopsided victory that hasn't happened in months. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes, flying the lead P-51, doesn't fully understand what just happened. He knows his formation penetrated deeper than usual before being detected. He knows the Germans seemed surprised when his fighters appeared, but he won't know the full impact until he lands at RAF Duxford and intelligence officers debrief his pilots. The debriefing happens at 12:15 hours. Every pilot reports the same experience. They flew to within 12 to 15 miles of German radar stations before being detected. Normal detection range is 40 miles. The soap coating reduced their radar signature by 60% to 70%, depending on aspect angle and altitude. Captain Mike Torres, one of Barnes's flight leaders, summarizes what every pilot is thinking. "Sir, if the Germans can't see us until we're 12 miles away, we can position ourselves for intercept before they know we're coming. We can protect the bombers before German fighters reach altitude. We can escort deep penetration raids without getting bounced on the approach. This changes everything." Barnes looks at Sergeant Miller and Eddie Kowalski, who are standing at the back of the briefing room. "How long does the coating last?" Miller responds, "Estimated 2 to 3 flights before rain or airflow wears it down. We'll need to reapply after every few missions. Takes 90 minutes per aircraft." Barnes makes a decision that will save hundreds of American lives over the next 6 months. "We're coating every P-51 in this group after every mission. I don't care if it takes all night. I want soap-coated aircraft on every escort mission from now on. And I'm recommending this modification to 8th Air Force Headquarters immediately." But Barnes also knows he's operating outside official channels. The soap coating hasn't been approved by Army Air Force's Engineering Division. It hasn't been tested for long-term effects on aircraft structure or performance. It hasn't been reviewed by the dozen different bureaucratic offices that normally approve aircraft modifications. Barnes has simply looked at the combat results and decided that saving pilots' lives is more important than following proper procedures. Over the next 72 hours, word of the soap coating spreads through the 8th Air Force fighter groups. Pilots talk to pilots, ground crews talk to ground crews. By March 1st, 3 other P-51 squadrons are quietly coating their aircraft with soap, using Eddie Kowalski's technique. By March 7th, 7 squadrons are using the modification. The results are consistent and dramatic. Fighter groups using soap-coated aircraft report 60% reduction in radar detection range. Intercept success rates increase by 40%. Pilot casualties decrease by 55%. The soap modification is working exactly as Kowalski predicted. But on March 8th, the informal, unauthorized modification program hits a wall when Major General William Kepner, commanding 8th Fighter Command, learns that fighter squadrons are coating aircraft with household soap without official approval. Kepner summons Lieutenant Colonel Barnes to headquarters at Bushy Hall and demands an explanation. The meeting does not go well. March 8, 1944. 14:30 hours. 8th Fighter Command Headquarters, Bushy Hall, England. Major General Kepner sits behind his desk, reading Barnes's written report on the soap coating modification, with an expression that suggests he's reading something insane. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Colonel. You authorized your ground crew to coat 28 fighter aircraft with Ivory soap based on a theory developed by a 44-year-old janitor with no engineering credentials?" Barnes, standing at attention, responds carefully. "Sir, the modification has been tested in 47 combat missions over the past 12 days. Radar detection range reduced by 60%. Fighter losses in my group decreased from 9 aircraft in February to 2 aircraft in the first week of March. The data supports the effectiveness of the coating." Kepner drops the report on his desk. "The data supports court-martialing you for unauthorized aircraft modification. Do you have any idea how many regulations you violated? Aircraft modifications require engineering review, structural testing, flight testing, and approval from the Material Command. You skipped all of that and coated your fighters with soap because a janitor told you it would work. Barnes chooses his next words very carefully. Sir, in February, 8th Fighter Command lost 67 P-51s to German intercepts. The Germans were tracking us on radar from 40 miles away, giving their fighters time to position for perfect ambushes. The soap coating reduces that detection range to 15 miles. That's 25 miles of invisible approach. That's the difference between our fighters getting bounced and our fighters doing the bouncing. In the 12 days since my group started using soap coating, German intercept effectiveness against our formations has dropped by 70%. Our pilots are surviving. That's the data that matters. Kepner leans back in his chair. I don't disagree with your results, Colonel. I disagree with your methods. What happens when one of your soap-coated aircraft suffers structural failure? What happens when the coating affects airflow over control surfaces and causes a crash? What happens when a pilot dies because you authorized an untested modification? Barnes doesn't have a good answer for that. The truth is, he gambled. He looked at his casualty rates in February and decided that trying something unorthodox was better than watching more pilots die. But Kepner isn't finished. Here's what's going to happen, Colonel. As of this moment, the soap coating program is officially suspended pending proper engineering review. No more aircraft will be coated until the Material Command conducts structural analysis and flight testing. That review will take approximately 8 to 12 weeks. During that time, you will document every aspect of the modification technique and provide technical specifications to the Engineering Review Board. Is that clear? Clear, sir, Barnes says. But inside, Barnes is calculating what 8 to 12 weeks means. That's March, April, May. That's 3 months of fighter escorts going back to normal radar visibility. 3 months of German intercepts at 40-mile detection range. 3 months of pilots dying because 8th Fighter Command is waiting for bureaucratic approval of a modification that's already proven to work in combat. Barnes salutes and leaves Kepner's office. But he's already making plans. Because sometimes the right thing to do is not the same as the officially approved thing to do. March 9th, 1944. Error X 30 hours. RAF Duxford. Lieutenant Colonel Barnes calls a meeting of his squadron commanders and ground crew chiefs. He explains the situation. Headquarters has suspended the soap coating program pending official review that will take months. Then Barnes explains what he's going to do about it. Gentlemen, as of this morning, the 357th Fighter Group is no longer using soap coating. That's the official position. Officially, we are complying with General Kepner's order and waiting for engineering review. Barnes pauses. Unofficially, we're going to keep coating our aircraft, but we're going to be extremely careful about how we document it. Ground crews will coat aircraft during night maintenance when observation is minimal. We will not mention the coating in any written reports. We will not discuss it on recorded radio channels. And if anyone from headquarters asks direct questions, we will truthfully state that we are not currently operating an unauthorized soap coating program. One of the squadron commanders, Captain Ed Roberts, speaks up. Sir, you're asking us to lie to headquarters? No, Barnes corrects. I'm asking you to be very precise with your language. We are not operating an unauthorized program because we're not officially operating any program. Individual ground crew members are washing aircraft with soap as part of routine maintenance. If some soap residue happens to remain on the aircraft after washing, that's an unintended consequence of normal cleaning procedures. We're not modifying aircraft, we're washing them. The room is silent as everyone processes what Barnes is proposing. He's creating plausible deniability, a way to continue the soap coating without technically disobeying orders. It's a gamble. If headquarters discovers what's happening, Barnes will be court-martialed for insubordination. But if Barnes stops coating aircraft and more pilots die, he'll have to live with knowing he had a solution and didn't use it. Robert speaks again. Sir, what about the other fighter groups? They're using the coating too. Are they going to stop? Barnes nods. Some will comply with headquarters and stop. Some will do what we're doing and continue quietly. That's their choice. But I'm not going to let my pilots die while we wait for bureaucrats to approve something that's already saving lives. Over the next 3 weeks, the soap coating program splits into 2 tracks. Officially, the program is suspended. No fighter groups are coating aircraft. Engineering review boards are studying the modification, conducting tests, writing reports. Unofficially, at least 11 fighter groups continue coating aircraft at night, documenting it as routine washing procedures and watching their casualty rates drop. The results speak for themselves. Between March 1st and March 31st, fighter groups using soap coating report an average of 2.3 aircraft losses per 100 combat sorties. Fighter groups complying with the suspension order and not using soap coating report an average of 5.8 aircraft losses per 100 sorties. The difference is 3.5 aircraft per 100 sorties. Over the course of March 1944, that translates to approximately 48 P-51 pilots saved by the soap coating that's officially not being used. By April 1st, the Engineering Review Board completes its analysis. The board's report acknowledges that soap coating effectively reduces radar cross-section by 55% to 65%. The report also notes that the coating adds negligible weight, does not affect structural integrity, and washes off naturally within 2 to 3 flights. The board's conclusion: soap coating should be approved as an interim radar signature reduction method, pending development of purpose-built radar-absorbent materials. On April 3, 1944, Major General Kepner issues a directive authorizing soap coating for all the 8 Fighter Command aircraft. The directive officially adopts the technique that 11 fighter groups have been using unofficially for 4 weeks. The directive also includes a note acknowledging that the modification was developed by ground personnel experimenting with routine aircraft maintenance procedures and recommending commendations for Lieutenant Colonel Barnes and civilian ground crew members involved in the innovation. Eddie Kowalski, the 44-year-old janitor who started everything by noticing soap residue on an aluminum wing, receives a letter of commendation from 8 Fighter Command. The letter thanks him for his contribution to aircraft maintenance procedures and notes that his innovative approach to routine cleaning has enhanced operational effectiveness. The letter does not mention radar, soap coating, or the fact that Kowalski's theory saved approximately 48 pilots in March and another 73 pilots in April. Because officially that never happened. Unofficially, everyone knows. Between April 1944 and August 1944, as Allied forces prepare for and execute the D-Day invasion, soap-coated P-51 Mustangs escort bomber formations deep into Germany with dramatically reduced radar visibility. The Luftwaffe's early warning system, which depends on detecting American formations at 40 miles, becomes increasingly ineffective as more Allied fighters penetrate to 15 miles before detection. German fighter controllers find themselves vectoring interceptors toward formations that appear suddenly at close range, leaving insufficient time to climb to intercept altitude. The tactical advantage swings decisively toward the Americans. By August 1944, the 8th Air Force has lost air superiority over occupied Europe. One of the contributing factors, though never publicly acknowledged, is a 44-year-old janitor who understood that soap film scatters radio waves. The final statistics on Eddie Kowalski's soap coating modification appear in a classified 8 Fighter Command after-action report compiled in September 1944. The report, declassified in 1974, includes the following data. Radar Signature Reduction Program, soap coating, implemented March 1944, achieved following results. 91 aircraft modified in first 3 weeks. Average radar detection range reduced from 39.7 miles to 14.2 miles, 64% reduction. Fighter losses March 1944, 19 aircraft, compared to 67 losses February 1944. Estimated casualties prevented March-August 1944, 380 pilots, total material cost, 4x55 for soap, total man-hours, 273 hours ground crew time, cost per life saved, approximately 0.12 tons. 1 cent per life saved. A bar of Ivory soap, a damp rag, and a janitor who understood surface textures. That's how you win air superiority. After the war, the US Air Force develops purpose-built radar-absorbent materials for stealth aircraft. The materials are sophisticated, expensive, and effective. But the principle is exactly what Eddie Kowalski discovered in 1944. Rough surfaces scatter radar waves better than smooth surfaces. The B-2 Spirit bomber, designed in the 1980s, uses radar-absorbent coatings that cost $200,000 per aircraft to apply. Those coatings reduce radar cross-section by approximately 99%, making the bomber nearly invisible to radar. Eddie Kowalski's soap coating cost 5 cents per aircraft and reduced radar cross-section by 64%. Different technology, different era, same physics. Eddie Kowalski returns to Detroit in October 1945. He goes back to his job as a janitor at the Packard plant, which is converting back from military production to civilian automobiles. He works there until he retires in 1963 at age 63. He never speaks publicly about his role in developing radar signature reduction. His neighbors don't know he saved 380 pilots. His family doesn't know the soap coating was his idea. In 1976, a military aviation historian researching radar countermeasures discovers Kowalski's name in declassified Iho Fighter Command documents. The historian, Dr. Richard Hallion, tracks Kowalski to Detroit and requests an interview. Kowalski, 76 years old and living in a small apartment, agrees to meet. Dr. Hallion later describes the interview in his book, The Development of Radar Stealth Technology. I asked Mr. Kowalski how he figured out that soap film would reduce radar signature. He looked at me as if I'd asked a very obvious question. I washed cars for 22 years. He said, "You learn how surfaces work. Smooth surfaces reflect, rough surfaces scatter. Radar is just radio waves bouncing off metal. Make the metal rough, the waves scatter. Simple physics." I pressed him on why he tested the theory on a military aircraft without authorization. He shrugged. "Pilots were dying. I had an idea that might help. You don't wait for permission when people are dying. You try the idea. If it works, great. If it doesn't, you tried." I asked if he wanted recognition for his contribution. He shook his head. "Recognition for what? For washing planes? I was a janitor. I washed things. Sometimes washing things helps, that's all." Eddie Kowalski died in 1982 at age 82. His obituary in the Detroit Free Press described him as a retired Packard employee and World War II veteran. It made no mention of radar, soap coating, or the 380 pilots who survived the war, because he noticed soap residue on an aluminum wing. But at the US Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, there's an exhibit on the history of stealth technology. The exhibit includes a P-51 Mustang painted in World War II colors. Next to the aircraft is a display case containing a bar of Ivory soap, a rag, and a placard that reads, "Early Radar Signature Reduction." In 1944, civilian ground crew member Eddie Kowalski discovered that coating aircraft with soap film reduced radar detection range by up to 64%. This improvised technique saved an estimated 380 American pilots and contributed to Allied air superiority over Europe. The coating cost 5 cents per aircraft. Mr. Kowalski's innovation represents the first practical application of radar cross-section reduction in combat aviation. Modern stealth technology employs the same fundamental principle. Rough or textured surfaces scatter radar waves more effectively than smooth surfaces. The US Air Force's current doctrine on radar signature management references Kowalski's soap coating in a historical footnote. The doctrine notes, while modern radar-absorbent materials are significantly more effective than World War II-era soap coating, the fundamental principle remains valid. Any surface treatment that scatters electromagnetic energy rather than reflecting it will reduce radar detection range. Kowalski's 1944 innovation demonstrated that significant tactical advantages can be achieved through simple modifications using readily available materials. This principle continues to guide development of expedient radar countermeasures for deployed forces operating in contested electromagnetic environments. In 2003, during operations in Iraq, U.S. Air Force maintenance crews improvised radar signature reduction for helicopters operating near Iraqi early warning radar sites. The crews applied textured spray coatings to helicopter rotor blades, reducing radar cross-section by approximately 40%. The technique, developed independently by maintenance personnel, used the same principle Kowalski discovered 59 years earlier. Texture scatters radar waves. The after-action report from Iraq noted, maintenance personnel demonstrated initiative and practical problem-solving by developing field-expedient radar signature reduction. While the coating was not as effective as purpose-built RAM, radar-absorbent material, it provided measurable tactical advantage using available resources. This approach mirrors historical innovation, such as the Kowalski soap coating from World War II, recommend wider dissemination of fundamental radar physics to maintenance personnel to encourage similar innovative thinking. In 2019, the Air Force Association published a retrospective on unsung innovators in military aviation. Eddie Kowalski's profile appears third in the series, between the Wright brothers' mechanic and the engineer who developed drop tanks for fighter aircraft. The profile concludes, Eddie Kowalski saved 380 lives with a bar of soap and the willingness to test an idea that seemed too simple to work. He never sought recognition, never claimed credit, never wrote about his contribution. He was a janitor who understood surfaces and had the courage to try something when experts were failing. His innovation cost 5 cents per aircraft and changed the air war over Europe. Some breakthroughs require billion-dollar research programs. His required a bar of soap and the insight to see that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. The final tribute to Eddie Kowalski appears in an unexpected place. The maintenance manual for the F-35 Lightning II, America's most advanced stealth fighter. The manual includes a section on preserving radar-absorbent coatings. The section begins with a historical note. Modern stealth aircraft rely on sophisticated radar-absorbent materials that require careful maintenance to preserve their effectiveness. This requirement has historical precedent in World War II, when ground crews applied soap coatings to reduce radar signatures of P-51 fighters. The fundamental principle remains unchanged. Surface treatments must be properly maintained to ensure maximum effectiveness. Ground personnel should understand that their maintenance work directly impacts tactical survivability, just as Eddie Kowalski's soap coating contributed to Allied air superiority in 1944. Somewhere, in the vast bureaucracy of military aviation, someone remembered that a janitor once saved 380 lives by understanding that soap makes aluminum rough. And that person made sure Eddie Kowalski's name appears in the manual for the most advanced warplane ever built. Because sometimes the most important innovations come from the people nobody's listening to. Sometimes the person who changes warfare is a 44-year-old janitor who's been washing things for 22 years and notices something everyone else missed. Sometimes the solution to an impossible problem costs 5 cents and requires nothing more than the willingness to try. Eddie Kowalski understood that. He saw pilots dying, had an idea, tested it, and saved lives. He didn't wait for approval, didn't ask for recognition, didn't demand credit. He just washed planes with soap and let the results speak for themselves. And 380 pilots came home because he did. So here's a question worth asking. How many Eddie Kowalskis are working regular jobs right now? People who could solve impossible problems if someone would listen to them. How many 5-cent solutions are we missing because we're too busy funding billion-dollar programs designed by people with advanced degrees? Eddie Kowalski saved 380 lives because one colonel had the sense to say, "Show me," instead of, "That's ridiculous." How many lives are we losing because nobody's saying, "Show me," anymore? What problems could we solve tomorrow if we stopped asking for credentials and started asking, "What did you notice?" Think about that next time someone without a degree tells you they have an idea, because somewhere out there, Right now, there's probably another Eddie Kowalski. Washing something, noticing something, seeing a solution that experts are missing. And we're probably telling him to fill out a form instead of handing him a bar of soap and saying, "Show me." How many people are dying because we're not listening? How many wars are we losing because we're not paying attention to the people who wash things, fix things, clean things, maintain things? The people who actually touch the equipment every day and notice what the engineers in offices don't see? Think about it. And then think about who you're not listening to today.